We have Dr. PhilipMerry here with us today. Hi, Dr. Philip.
Hi, how are you, Janet?
I'm good. I'm good.
You look very happy.
Yeah, thank you for agreeing to come for this session and sharing your insights and experience with us.
Thank you for organizing it. It's a great service you're giving to us all.
You're most welcome. I think it benefits not only others, I think I'm also learning tremendously from all these sessions. And it's also sharpening my skills on the tech IT tools, how to handle when things don't go right. So it's a good test for me too.
You're doing very well on that. I've seen some of the episodes. You're a master of crisis yourself.
Yeah, I think I have headed into too many, so I have to learn how to pick myself up every single time this happens. So, Dr. Philip, would you care to share a little bit before the episode premiere starts on currently how are you? What are you preparing yourself for?
Okay, I'm very excited actually at the moment because I think one of the unintended benefits of COVID-19 is getting us as lead trainers
Mhm.
to actually know how to reach a bigger audience around the world. Because in fact, we now have markets that we can access and sell to at any time. So I'm actually quite excited. I think doing the online stuff is relatively easy, some simple things to learn, but I'm now preparing myself to sell programs much further afield than just in Singapore.
Yes, I think that's the case too. For me, I think I'm quite surprised on the subscriptions and how far it has reached. We have people from Russia even subscribing actually
Really? Okay.
to this list. So it's quite amazing how online is going for a different one. So we have if you just join us, basically today's episode we have Dr. PhilipMerry. He'll be talking about his encounter with COVID-19, and we'll talk to you about how to face our fears when we do come across one, and how can we build our resilience such that it can be our advantage. So together with this, I think we have Jennifer, who's actually online right now. She's saying good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on
Good morning,
when.
Jennifer. NUYA stands for what?
No, that's her last name.
Oh, okay. I thought it was an organization.
Yes,
National
yes.
Union of Yogurt Appreciation.
That's her last name.
Hi,
So
Jennifer.
now in your case, right? I think your a little bit of your background, because I don't think we really have a bit of time, too much time to share in the
Okay.
episode premiere.
Well, very roughly,
Mm-hmm.
I've been working since 1972 for 10 years, from 1972, 8 years, 1972 to 80. I was a marriage guidance counselor and family therapist in London, dealing with hooligan children and their families in London. In 1980, I went to Sri Lanka to head up a leadership institute for the Ministry of Education. I went back to the UK where I worked for Ruffy Park Leadership Institute, a wonderful organization. 1988, I went to Hong Kong to work for Reuters, and then Singapore with Reuters, and then since 91 in Singapore, running my own business with my wife.
Yeah. So, but I think you have also been traveling a lot out of Singapore, even when you have been based here since
Oh, for
1941.
sure, yes. Our business is a small niche business here in Singapore, specializing in anything to do with cross-cultural teams and leading teams, the human factor. So from Singapore, our company has been asked to do sessions in 61 countries. And I really appreciate the ability that we have to travel the world and see the wonderful sights of the world.
Yeah. So now I think in my previous book on effective Asian leadership, I was interviewing you about leadership values.
Sure.
Do you see since the 80s, 1980s till now, a shift in terms of the leaders' values, especially if they are someone who were, especially like even for yourself, someone who were from maybe the Western part of the world, then they come to Asia. Do you see any kind of changes in terms of their values, in terms of how they view the world and how they interact with people?
That's a big question. We have a whole 2-day seminar on that.
Okay.
I think to be a global leader in these days, you have to be, number one, understanding of your own culture. Like mostly in Singapore, we're a collective culture where we focus on the group. If you're going to go work in America as a global leader, you've then got to recognize America is an individualist culture, and your ability to both be authentic in living your own culture while at the same time adjusting to appreciate other cultures is absolutely crucial. That doesn't mean change who you are. That means recognize that other people do things in a different way, and it's not because they want to fight with you. It's just their natural culture. So yes, I mean, I'm married to a Singaporean, so that was my steepest learning curve in terms of understanding culture. And very often my wife and I have arguments which are all about culture still, and that, I guess that will always be. But yes, in today's world, very few teams are monocultural. So I think leaders must understand their own values, where they came from, and how they might be different from those from other cultures.
Right. Now, with COVID, COVID situation, I think is forcing a lot of us actually going online instead of the face-to-face interactions, where it is easier, I think, to gauge someone and try to understand their culture as well as build relationship.
Well, you know what I've noticed, Janet, is,
Yeah.
and I've just learned this actually through going online a lot these days,
Yes.
because I didn't like online. I thought it's just a one-way traffic, etc., etc. But I've actually found that it's actually much more intimate than face-to-face in some situations. Small groups with like 9, 10 people, where you can see everybody's faces, is absolutely crucial. And imagine when you're face-to-face training, when somebody asks a question, you can't really see their face, or other participants can't see their face. But what I'm getting to love about online training is that all 9 faces, if you've got all the faces there, I'm not talking about big presentations to 1,000 people, but I like to keep my seminars small, so you can actually see the facial expression of all 9 people, which means emotions and attitudes are open to everybody. So to me, that's a crucial thing that's good about online.
I see. Interesting. So if you have just joined us today, we have here Dr. PhilipMerry with us.
Hi, everybody.
Hi. In this particular episode, basically, Dr. PhilipMerry will be sharing his encounter with COVID-19, how each of us at different points in our life will face our fear and how we should learn to deal with it, and how to build resilience to become your advantage. So we're at 2 p.m. Exactly on the dot at the moment. So I'll be showing the episode premiere, which was recorded about a month ago. Then after that, we'll resume the discussion and Q&A session with Dr. PhilipMerry. So Dr. PhilipMerry, I'm going to actually just hide you for a little while and bring up the video episode.
Wonderful.
See you later. Hi, welcome to the Leadership During Crisis Online Summit series. Thank you for taking your time to watch these episodes. Please remember to subscribe at our YouTube channel. We will be releasing the episodes 3 times a week on Mondays, Wednesday, Friday at 2 p.m.
I help people realize individually and in the corporate world that synchronicity is real.
I was just watching your video or your sharings in terms of your feelings and how you overcome some of the feelings that you had when you thought you had COVID-19. Would you care to share a little bit more on some of the lessons that you learned?
The biggest lesson, Janet, is I've been in this business a long time. I teach resilience, I teach managing crisis, etc., etc. And I thought I had this down, I got this handled. But I was shocked when I found out that my doctor wanted me to go to have a COVID-19 test. I thought he was just going to give me some cough syrup. And so the first lesson is, no matter how old you are, fear and anxiety stalks you, and you don't know what your response will be. Because I really had that feeling of fear of, my God, what if I die? What if I give this to my family, etc., etc., etc. So that was my first lesson, is to remember that even if you think you've been in the business a long time and can cope with all of this, and you teach this stuff, be prepared for what it will do to you and how it will make you feel.
Right. So how did the principles that you taught in your lessons help you through this episode?
Well, one of the first principles, because basically, I think, Janet, the skills for facing any crisis are all about resilience. And the first thing that I learned, the principle, which I've taught many times, is don't avoid how it feels. If you are afraid, then face that fear, acknowledge that fear. So the first principle is to be aware of your own emotions. And linked very closely to that, I see a lot of people in crisis wanting to put a positive spin on everything immediately. And in this COVID crisis that we're going through, I see a lot of people saying, be positive, think the best. And I think we're only human. And it's human, even at my experience and my age, to be afraid. So principle number 2 is acknowledge the fear. Because only when you acknowledge it can you move out of denial into accepting the situation. So accept the situation, but be able to separate fact from fantasy. The reality is, although I thought, oh my God, what if I die? The fact is that a minute % of people die. But the fear that's in all of us goes to the worst situation. So very, very important, face the facts. It's only a small percentage of people that get serious. But once you've done that, we need to recognize that the mindsets still are there. And most of our mindsets of fear come from memories and old situations that you face. So being able to recognize and name the fear, like I said, my God, what if I might die? Or what if it gets really serious? The fact is it's not going to happen. And that fear comes from something in our bodily and physiological system called the survival impulse. All of us are built for survival, which activates fight or flight. But the problem is when we're in crisis, and in this COVID-19 crisis, if you continue to be in survival mode or mindset of fear, that's going to make it worse. So I always encourage people, and I did this with myself in this situation, recognize the old mindset and then pause. We human beings are the only animal who are able to choose their response. Most animals, fear, want to kill, whatever, they do it, it's reactive. Whereas we have that ability to pause and then choose our response. And that's one of the most crucial skills in a crisis, personal or business. Recognize the fear, understand if it's real. If it's not, then stop and choose your response. And that was crucial for me in this current situation, being in lockdown and fear for myself and fear whether my wife had caught it. It was crucial that I was able then to say, now let's choose what my response will be.
Right.
If you can master that, you can master crisis.
That's great. I think you have also shared that you teach these principles to teams, to leaders as well. How would you change these steps, or is it the same when you are a leader facing these particular
it's the same steps. For a long time, I've taught a program called Resilience Advantage, and I've also taught a program called Change Your Mind, both based on really well-researched models. And so it's the same. When a team or a leader of a team is going through crisis, the automatic response of your team will be fear and anxiety. And you've got to help people just express that. I see lots of leaders in change situations try to kind of say to the team, no negative talk. Not true. If people are afraid, you've got to allow them to express that fear. Once that's done, and I take teams through this process many times all over the world, I've worked in 61 countries doing programs like this, is then say, okay, what values or behaviors do we now want? Because we need to move through this crisis. What behaviors do I want in COVID-19 in my personal case? It's exactly the same in teams. And you get the team and the organization to agree on the ways in which they're going to behave with each other. And crucial as well is to have a mission linked to that. Help the team get together on what is it they want to do in this crisis.
Dr. Philip, the key is a lot of us, when we are in a fear mode, we spiral downwards and we can't really recognize and stop it. How do you recognize the different phases and get yourself out of it?
That's a great question, Janet, because so often in a crisis, we're stuck in fear, thoughts that go round and round and round and round. And you need to be able to move beyond that. So what I do, and I've done this for many years, is number one, get the person to begin to breathe deeply. Whether it's a group or whether it's an individual, I say to them, just start the process of breathing deeply. And even when the thoughts still come, I say, still keep on breathing deeply. When you breathe in calm, and imagine when you breathe out, you are breathing out all of the fear and anxiety and constant words that go on. That will take a while, a few minutes at least. But once they are there in a more calm state, I ask people just to rest there for a period of time. Because once you rest there, you can then be separate from the thoughts. And remember, the thoughts are just old neural pathways in the brain, memories of the past. And I literally say to people, look at the thought you have of fear and say to that thought, this is probably step 3, say to that thought, thank you for serving me in the past, I no longer need you. And imagine that thought really dissipating and dissolving. So you now are in that magical space when you can create something new. So I get either individuals or teams to say, what is it now you need to get through this crisis going forward? Could be a feeling, could be an attitude, whatever it is. And I get people to imagine that new thought. And in the same way that they flooded their body with calmness to enable slowly but surely the fearful feeling to go, then they have the new thought, which they're also breathing in. And very important, this is all breathing which goes to the heart. The HeartMath Institute, which designed this whole process over many years, breathe to the heart because the heart is central to impacting the whole physiology. So as you breathe to the heart, and these are very specific techniques, you imagine the new positive feeling that you've thought about flooding the whole body. You can see that what we're talking about is a physiology here. You've had thoughts going all around you. You need to stop that process and then begin to have thoughts that flood the body. And once you feel that within yourself, then you send it to whatever project that you need to do well, a person you're worried about. For me, when I did this process recently, I was fearful of my wife being affected if I got COVID-19. So I was sending to her all sorts of positive, strong emotion and visual images, imagining her well, imagining her in vibrant health. If it's a project, then imagining the project going really, really well. And then once that is done, the final process that we'll often go through is that in that state of what we call heart coherence, so all these steps are about heart coherence, is what new innovative idea do you have to deal with the current crisis that you're facing? And so it's about a 5-step process. Because
So much of what people teach about this is good intellectual stuff. The interesting fact is that 85% of change programs fail because they don't enable the individual to let go of old mindsets and build a new mindset. And so our process is very specific to beginning to get yourself individually, if it's a personal crisis, or the whole team, to replace mindsets with new mindsets. And we don't just intellectually say, oh, change your mindset. It's no good. If somebody's in fear, we've got to hold their hand through steps that will help them get there. It doesn't just take one time. It's something that has to be constantly practiced. Do you think that when I was waiting for my COVID results, one time only, okay, I'm not any fearful any longer of my wife getting this. I had to do it hundreds of times probably. So it's a question of constant practice, but we give people a cheat sheet that enables them to move through that process. Best learning and the best training is when people have an emotional experience that touches their life in enabling them to move forward. So any program I do is all about practical techniques to help you go forward.
Oh, I think I just unmuted you. You were saying something?
Okay. Did I say all that, really?
You
That
can't
makes sense, I hope.
Of course it does. It does.
Okay.
So now we're back to the live Q&A.
Okay.
So for the audience that's actually watching, you can actually key in the questions that you have. If you're coming in from a desktop, please key in your questions on the right-hand side of the chat box. If you're coming in from a mobile phone, please key in your questions actually at the bottom of the screen. But to key in the questions, please do log in into the YouTube account in order for your questions to show up so that we can ask them. So while we're waiting for questions to come in, Dr. Philip, because I think there's usually quite a bit of lag before it comes on in. So for this resilience program, I think it sounds like it's not just for these particular COVID-19 crisis. How have you actually utilized it in helping, whether it's teams or individuals previously?
Any team or organization or individual going through change often causes a great deal of stress, and the program, and that's the program, it's called the Resilience Advantage, is about helping them move through what all of us have, which is stress. So it helps them understand how the physiology works. And we go into good detail. The Heart Math organization over 30 years designed this program through rigorous research. And it's the #1 program in the States and around the world that helps first responders and nurses and police and army who in their jobs are going into stressful situations. It helps them cope with not letting stress overtake them. Because very often in today's world, all of us have stress. But the problem is that we don't know how to come down from stress. So once stress happens, the next phone happens and it gets worse and it gets worse and it gets worse. So the program is both the physiology and the psychology of enabling people to have their body come out of stress from what we call depletion, where your energies are depleted, and to renew those energies so that you're more able as a leader or as a team to effectively deal with the situation. And we call it heart coherence. Heart coherence is the heart really is the prime mover in the body's physiology that enables the brain to actually make decisions that are good, control their emotions, and build proper relations with other people. So it's a program that takes all through that, both intellectually understanding it, but as I said in that video just now, experiencing it. So we take people through the steps that enable them to control their stress and deal with crisis more effectively.
Right. Thanks. I think we have a question coming in from Jennifer. She's asking the session has been very informative, Dr. Mary. So she's asking, she's curious as to how many weeks does it take a person to shed the old mindset and embody a new one?
However long you want it to take, Jennifer. Now, I say that because I've experienced people who, with one session, and it's a 3-step breathing process, let go of stress, and it's such a profound experience that they let go of it there and then, and it doesn't come back. But if you're more normal, like me, like most of us, it takes a while. And so you try one, and again, in the program, we have very specific techniques, 3 or 4 specific techniques to go through. It will be fine for a couple of days, but then it will come back. Because remember, memories and old habits and old mindsets are there in the brain. And some of those embedded mindsets are bigger and stronger and thicker than others. But I don't want to, I would say if you practice every day, then within a few days, you can begin to let go of the old mindset and move to the new one. But I've seen people do it in one session. So I don't want to give any definitive thing, Jennifer. You might be one of those people who's so creative that you can let go of it straight away.
Or it could be a situation, right? I think previously, it's been a long time, I think virtual training, online is available, digital technologies, but without the COVID-19 forcing us to be really staying at home and we cannot do anything about it, right now, actually, we have no choice, but there will definitely be the stress when you are trying to encounter utilizing it
For sure.
the first time.
We've had in Singapore, we've had 3 minutes. I've lived in Singapore for 30 years. I've got an office that looks out over the city, but I've not been there. And so when I go out, it's going to take a while for this habit that's come for 3 months, which is when you go with people, keep your distance from people. Now, for all my life, I love to get close to people, but I've noticed that when I go shopping, and I go shopping Great Wall City, it's the same process, and I keep myself distant. So it's almost like the habits that we've learned in this COVID time, we need to begin to let go of that. And it's particularly difficult because the government now is ending circuit breaker, but the mindset that we've learned in 3 months is still there. And there is still some real fear in the sense of, is COVID still out there? And so I think it's important.
We have another question from
Ed.
Ed. Yeah, he's asking, thank you for your sharing. Is there a method to measure the stress level of a person?
Yes, there is, Ed. Now, there are many different tests, just handwritten tests, where we know which parts of the body are affected by stress. So I've got a hand test where you go through, do I experience this and this and this? But we've also got what we call an M-wave electronical device, which you attach to your ear, and then it measures your heart coherence. So we're able, for somebody who says, I think I'm over this, I've got no more fear anymore, then we hook them up to this M-wave, which then will tell them about their heart coherence. Basically, the more coherent your heart is, the more you're through the stress period. But if your heart coherence is jaggedy, meaning not regular, then you're not through that particular period. And you can actually be, in some ways, your emotional life is okay, but actually your physiology is in stress. So there are different ways in which stress affects different parts of our lives. But yes, Ed, there is a test to be able to assess that. And that's important because most of us don't like to admit that we are in stress. We have this saving face, we want to look good, and there's been a whole period in business life where you don't like to tell your boss that you're stressed, because that might mean he thinks you maybe are somebody that he could fire. But I think hopefully we're now moving through that to say it's actually okay and normal to feel stressed.
So Jennifer said thanks.
Thanks, Jennifer.
The other thing I would like to ask you is because I'm also in another community where I'm actually reading quite a lot on the startup community.
Uh-huh.
So with a lot of the startups, I think cash flow can be quite a challenge.
Sure.
And with this COVID-19, I just received a message from someone yesterday. They are not able to go out to actually do their normal sales because their clients are cut off. So it is a very tough period of time. You mentioned that one session is not enough to actually build that resilience or breathing deeply, but is there any particular steps or tips that needs to be done actually before they even go for this deep breathing technique?
Well, Janet, this is not just startups.
Yeah.
This is COVID-19.
Yes.
What have I been doing the last 2 or 3 months? Trying to manage our finances because money's not coming in. And the other thing is that my business manager is now working from home. And so that means that she can't bring the checks to my office for me to sign them. So for the last 3 months, I've been managing the finances. And it worries me and it stresses me. And so I think, as well as breathing exercises, etc., 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 you've got to have also sharp business skills. And again, it's not just startups, it's every small company now emerging from COVID-19. How are you going to get the customers back? So we need, I think, now more creative ways. And I was saying to you earlier, I think with COVID-19, we now have the whole world as our market. I'm a trainer and consultant. And so I think that the world will change in terms of how to get the money. And I think all of us have got to be probably more business minded on how to do that globally, because markets are available to us that we didn't even know about. The other thing I want to say, and I'm not sure exactly whether it's answering your question, Janet, but I used to think that being online with webinars was a bit boring and it was just one way somebody speaks to people. I found that actually small seminars of about 10 people, and I like to keep to 10 people most of the time, can be more intimate than face-to-face training, because there in front of you are the faces of all the people. When you ask a question in face-to-face training, if you're sitting at another table, you can't see or sometimes hear what the person has said. So I'm beginning to find that online webinars can be more intimate and more close than expected, which, if any of you are going to be involved in webinars, so even if you're a business person, you're going to be doing a lot more meetings online. We're all rushing to get the latest technology, but I think seminars are pretty simple. You need a good camera, you need a good microphone, and you need to know what Zoom looks like. But absolutely crucial, and I've noticed this, and I noticed this because I saw somebody do a webinar, and they began with, and there were 35 people, they began with, okay, good to see you. We're on this program about leadership, item 1. And they went straight to their PowerPoint. None of the videos of the 35 people came on. And if you have just black boxes or still photographs, you've not engaged the audience. So my strong advice, any one of you, trainers or leaders who are online on a webinar or a Zoom call, spend a lot of time designing the first 30 seconds. Because people need to feel engaged within the first 30 seconds and have their videos on. Because if they don't, you ain't got engagement and you've got nobody interested. And this poor chap I saw do this webinar, when it came to questions, after he'd done 20 PowerPoints, he then said, okay, any questions? Nobody had got their video on and he got no questions. So I think what's truly important, if you really want to run effective meetings with your team or trainers, pay attention to the human factor in the first 30 seconds. That will determine success or failure.
Thank you. So I'm showing some of the comments. Ed is saying so scientific, and thank you for the information. And we have Edmund Chew from Malaysia down as well.
Hi, Edmund.
Hi. And then Jennifer also commented, good lighting is important.
Very, very important.
Yeah. So The other thing, actually, it was also one of the discussion that we had in an earlier session on Wednesday. I think between training and facilitation, where training, there is a learning outcome that you're trying to bring the participants to. But in a facilitation session, what has your experience been if you are trying to guide them online to a non-definite outcome, basically?
I think people often try and say there's a difference between training and facilitation. I don't think there is.
Mm-hmm.
When you are training, so in the video you saw just now, I was training, meaning I was giving information. But then if I have 9 people in front of me, I need to facilitate, meaning get the audience involved. I'm a big believer, and I've been in the training industry for 41 years. You need to be a lecturer sometimes, a trainer sometimes, a facilitator sometimes, and a coach sometimes. Neither one of those is better than the other. So my advice, and especially in COVID-19 recovery, you need to pay attention to psychological safety. It's a big thing, meaning that if you are in a group or managing a team, you need for people to feel free to speak up and not be afraid. So even though you're presenting as a trainer in a webinar, you've got to be able to say to people, if you disagree, let me know. And that's to do with how safe have you made the environment right at the beginning. So I encourage people, you're going to be a trainer and a facilitator. I think those need to be hand in hand, which means that, again, right at the beginning, do some introductions. Use the breakout rooms, especially at the beginning. Get them to say, what's your name? What's a great experience in your life? What's the most difficult thing? Something that bonds them. And then when they come back together, they're more likely to keep the video on. And when the video's on, then you can facilitate. And that literally means getting them to report back. So that is more important, I think, in webinar post-COVID situations than ever before. Training and facilitation go hand in hand for me.
I see.
One more tip
Yes.
to overcome fear in COVID-19. And I was discussing this on video with my wife last night. Go to YouTube, and I'm watching a lot of YouTube stuff. And I've noticed that I'm moving towards inspirational situations that move me and make me feel good. I'm watching a lot of Barack Obama speeches, because when you feel good and touched, that actually helps your physiological system and actually builds your immune system. So make sure in this time, folks, you watch any movie or any person that inspires you, because they will leave all the endorphins in your body that make you a better leader. And I'm watching 4 or 5 inspirational clips every day to make me feel good, because there's so much bad news. So I want to feel good. Sorry to interrupt, Janet.
No worries. We'll come back to you, Dr. Philip. So I will show where they can actually understand you, catch hold of you, as well as you have a Resilience Advantage webinar that's coming up. I'll share that.
Anybody wants to come, I'd love to see you.
Okay.
Special prices for COVID-19.
Yes. So let me come back to you a little later. So similar to all the other episodes, you can go to Effective Asian Leadership page, and then the website itself, click on the Leadership During Crisis page, and you will get into the page where you can see all the various different episodes. And when you come into Dr. Philip's episode, click on the Watch Now, and you will get into his episode where you will find out a little bit more about what Dr. PhilipMerry shared about his background earlier on. There's also just his interview video that's already uploaded there. If, let's say, you miss the front part actually of the Q&A and you would like to watch it, you can click on the second button where you can actually listen to the recorded live Q&A with Dr. Philip. So here, there's also the background and how you can get in touch with him and the other kind of trainings that he does. He also does team coaching with the Belvin system as well, besides the heart resilience. Now, as I mentioned earlier on at the beginning of this week, because there will be in total 30 episodes, which will then be quite a lot if you are trying to sift through the categories. So we have actually uploaded it onto the learning.corporatetrainerconnect.com website, where you can sign on and then you can access all the prior videos by category, so that's easier for you to see. And in here you will see other courses, and one of which is actually under mental health or resilience, is Dr. PhilipMerry's program on the resilience advantage itself. So he did mention that it's a very, very good price, I think, because all are agreeable that at this moment in time is really about giving. So he's actually doing this seminar or webinar, which he mentioned original price was $497 US, is currently at $99 US. If I'm not wrong, there are 2 sessions which is using Zoom. One is on the 29th of May, 2.5-hour session. The other one is on the 5th of June. I'll key this into his webpage so that you know how to sign on for it, as well as actually into these episodes live Q&A link itself, so that you can have the connection as well as the link to it. Let me just get back to Dr. Philip. So while we're waiting for Dr. PhilipMerry to come back on, some of the messages came in to answer that they had a great session and that they had great tips for Dr. PhilipMerry. So let's hope that he's back on soon. I think maybe something is wrong with his system, because the WhatsApp message is actually not really in there. But really appreciate all of you for coming on board with us and listening to this particular session itself. Hi. Unfortunately, I think the system is not able to connect back to Dr. PhilipMerry, because I noticed the WhatsApp message is not getting through. But if you have any questions that you'd like to ask him, please do key into the comments at the chat box itself, so that we can get him to reply if there's any other questions that you might have. In the meantime, I will key in and upload this recorded live session onto the web page that I showed you earlier on. So I'm going to type into the message right now. It's the website called effectiveasianleadership.com. Then in there, you can actually click on the leadership during crisis page. Then from there, you will be able to find out a little bit more about what Dr. PhilipMerry offers and his webinar as well. So thank you everyone for your time and goodbye.